My name is Welcome Wilson. I'm the chair of the Agency Operations Committee. It is 12:45, and I would like to call the July 24th, 2024 Agency Operations Committee meeting to order. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via video conference and ask that they observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your phone when not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. Members, when I call your name, please announce present. Richard Clemmer, Vice Chair.
Present.
Fred Farias. Juan Navarez.
Present.
Ashley Thomas.
Present.
Emma Walschlager.
Present.
And myself, Welcome Wilson. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Agenda item number 2 is approval of the minutes from the April 24th, 2024 Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Motion by Emma. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Juan. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
The motion passes. Item number 3 is public testimony. Mary, do we have anyone registered to testify today? And we will then now move on to the next agenda. Item number 4 is consideration and possible action to approve the consent calendar. The consent calendar includes items that can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. The consent items are highlighted, or the highlighted items in gray on the agenda. We're going to vote on the consent items in 2 votes, non-rule items and rule items. Members, the following non-rule items on the consent calendar for consideration is agenda item 5A, report on grants and contracts. Members, does anyone want to remove this item from the non-rule consent calendar? Does anyone want to add any items to the non-rule consent calendar? Is there a motion to approve this non-rule consent item?
Motion.
Motion by Juan, second by Emma. All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Members, next we have to vote on the rule consent items. These rules are either technical, conforming, or implement non-controversial policies around which there is consensus. Following rule items are on the consent item for consideration today. Agenda item 9A, consideration and possible action to adopt the repeal of Board Rules Chapter 1, Subchapter A, Section 1.10 concerning the Public Information Act. Agenda item 9B, consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Board Rules Chapter 1, Subchapter A, Section 1.8 concerning historically underutilized businesses, hubs. Members, does anyone want to remove either of these rule items from the consent calendar? Is there a motion to approve the rule consent items? Do I have a motion? Yep. Motion by Dr. Farias, second by Emma. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say no.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. We'll move on to item 5. Agenda item 5A was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5B is discussion and possible action to approve the legislative appropriation requests, LAR, including exceptional items. Sarah Keaton, Deputy Commissioner for Administration, and Anthony Infiniti, Chief Financial Officer, will present this item and be available for questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Infantini, the Chief Financial Officer. We are here for 2026 and 2027, and we have some unique aspects we have to discuss this time, and we'll get through with respect to the calendar of as far as the appropriations requests and kind of where we stand at the current point in time as with respect to every state agency. So we'll walk through that with you and still kind of discuss kind of the direction we want to go and hopefully answer any of your questions about kind of how we can fill in the rest of the gaps on our appropriations request when we can. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the LAR in general is a way agencies request their appropriations on a biennial basis. It's done every even year in the summer, typically. I say that. So it's where we can, as an agency, request changes to our budget, where we can request additional funding from the legislature. And that's kind of one of the key things we want to talk about today. The major components are an administrator statement that goes in the appropriations request, our baseline budget, which I'll walk through, which is really more of a mathematical alignment of our current funding, revisions to our budget riders, which are technical or administrative items that really direct us on kind of what we can and can't do with the money or kind of give us some guidance on some of the budget components, and then the exceptional item requests themselves. And that's really our big discretionary item that we want to present to the board today. You go to the next slide. So generally, the LAR timeline works with the release of a policy letter in the summer. That is guidance from the oversight offices, the leadership, state leadership, on agencies on what they can and can't, what they should and should not request, kind of where our starting point is with respect to the current budget. And then what we receive on the heels of that is called a general revenue or general revenue dedicated funds limit, which is really how much of a current state revenue appropriations we can include the next biennium. 2 years ago, to provide some context, we received those in June and then early July. At this point, we still haven't received any guidance as far as the instructions or the limit themselves, but we're kind of preparing, knowing that once those instructions come out, like I said, there's a lot of mathematics behind. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can in what we prepare. Beyond that, once we submit our LARs, there are hearings with the governor's office and the legislative budget board, and they work to produce the budget in the first week of the legislative session in January. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the LAR base funding is really the starting point of the budget request. That's something that is usually expressed as a percentage of your current budget. In good years, it's usually 100%. We don't anticipate, given the current state revenue, that the base budget should be less than 100%, but we will kind of adjust as need be. The other thing that we have to watch out for in those base budget requests is if there are any items pulled out that were considered one-time in nature. We've worked with the legislative budget board a bit to kind of explain the ongoing needs of some of the funding provided. However, we do have to kind of be ready to respond and react should our base budget be different than what we expect. And then beyond that is where we can request exceptional items. And those are the items that go above and beyond the budget we're currently working with. And that's what we want to present to you today.
The two major exceptional items that we'd like to present today for your consideration are on slides 5 and 6. So on slide 5, student financial aid is traditionally always the agency's top exceptional item. And what we wanted to present to you today is an exceptional item request that is really predicated on providing some additional portability and predictability for students in the financial aid process. So part of this request will be just based on sort of population growth and needing to add funds sort of as the population of students in higher ed and that are eligible for these programs grows. The legislature needs to add funding just to keep up with that. The other big part of this request would be some additional funding that, in combination with some statutory changes to restructure the programs a little bit, would allow students in the top 25% of their graduating class who are otherwise eligible for Texas grants and TEOG to be guaranteed to get this this scholarship and this grant. So that way, when they're applying to colleges, they have the certainty of, if I meet these requirements and I'm in this top 25%, I know I'll get this funding. And we're also working to add some components to this to maintain funding for the Texas Leadership Scholars, which you just heard about. That is, since that program is new, the base years don't include sort of the full cohorts of funding yet, so we'll need to request additional funding for that. And also looking at some additional funding for the Texas Armed Service Scholarship programs. So our projections are that this item, to achieve all of those goals, that this item would be between $350 and $400 million to present to the legislature. The next slide, slide 6, the other major exceptional item request that we wanted to bring forward for your consideration is around research initiatives. So this would have a couple of components. The largest dollar-wise component would be funding for the TRIP, Texas Research Incentive Program, that you heard about earlier from Emily Cormier. Has a current balance that you heard earlier of about $383 million. So we would request funding from the legislature for that unmatched balance. And then also include some additional funding to create a program to recruit more high-achieving research doctoral students to Texas. And part of that could be in combination with the Texas Research Leadership Scholars. So the Leadership Scholars has a graduate component. So looking to request more funding for that, and also potentially some new programs as well to attract that top graduate talent to Texas to kind of elevate the research program in Texas. So those would be the two significant policy exceptional item requests that we would bring forward for your consideration. And then, as Anthony mentioned, moving to slide 7, we also have a placeholder in here for if our base limit is less than the total funding we received for the 24-25 biennium, we would anticipate including an exceptional item to get that funding back. So that would include funding for our kind of data, cybersecurity, and college and career advising, things like Apply Texas and My Texas Future. Those items we received funding for last session. We anticipate that funding continuing, but if for some reason we needed to ask for that funding back, we would add that as a third exceptional item. And happy to answer any
Great.
questions about those.
Thank you both. Any questions from the members?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
want
sir.
to ask a question about last session, some exceptional items that weren't fully covered that maybe we might want to revisit. Or is there anything that we can recall that maybe might be something for us to look at?
So our financial aid, so last session, our financial aid exceptional item was mostly funded, was not fully funded at the amount we requested in the legislative appropriations request. Our other items were all funded. So I think, again, continuing the focus on financial aid, but there were no other items for last session that were not fully funded.
I appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman. In financial aid in particular, the legislature did put additional funding in, especially on the TEOG program last time. So part of what the team has been working on is how you can make the TEOG for the 2-year institutions and Texas Grant work together more seamlessly. So transfer students aren't disadvantaged, for example, when they transfer. But I did want to underline Sarah's point about more predictability and portability about financial aid, because so the legislature historically doesn't fund all the eligible students, say for the Texas Grant. And that means that you have students, even high achieving students, say who are in the top 10% or top 25% of their class. And if they go to one institution, they might receive Texas Grant. But if they go to another institution, they might not receive Texas Grant. And they don't really know until they get their financial aid package pretty late in April. So, of course, one of the initiatives that we've been working on that'll be rolled out between now and the board meeting in October is a new direct admissions initiative. So students can find out right up front, are they offered admission to different universities? If the legislature would be able to guarantee the funding, say, for students in the top 25% of their class, then we could signal that to students. And then they could know up front if they go to U of H or they go to UNT or they go to A&M or wherever they go, that they're going to have that Texas Grant. And so it's not waiting until, say, April to find out. They could know that up front, like right at the beginning of their senior year of high school. And so that'll change the conversation around the dinner table about, whether or not higher education is in reach. Because what we see consistently, especially for our first generation students, is they overestimate the costs. They don't understand all the financial aid that's going to be available to them. And so they think that higher education is not going to be within reach for them because they don't understand what kind of financial aid will be available. So that's part of the general idea, is to get all of these things working together more seamlessly so we can remove those financial barriers, provide more predictability and portability for our students.
And then the goal there is to educate the counselors in high school about that predictability.
Absolutely. So, and of course, we've got a unique tool at the coordinating board that no other agency like ours in the nation has, where we're directly connected to all those high school counselors. So if the legislature would make that change, we can push that information out almost in real time to the counselors and the college advisors who advise more than 95% of our secondary students across the state.
Commissioner, question for you on that. If somebody's right on the verge, say they, are
Yep.
24 in the top 24%, but at the end of their junior year, so they're close. What happens if, at the end of their senior year, they drop down and they're below that 25%? Does that mean they lose it completely if it's all lost in the last year?
So the way that automatic, what I would anticipate is it would work the way automatic admissions works. So generally the way that works is it's anchored to where you are at the end of your junior year, that you could be guaranteed. Now you could get into that if you became eligible later, but you wouldn't lose your eligibility if at the end of your junior year you were in the top 25% of your class, but you slipped out of it, say mid-year, senior year, you would already, that would be something though, Mr. Clemmer, I think it'd be pretty important for us to make sure when we're working on those necessary statutory changes that we could do that, because otherwise it would undermine that predictability for our students.
Yeah, that was my only concern about it. So thank you for that.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you very much. If not, can I have a motion to approve the
I'll make a
legislation?
motion.
Motion by Mr. Clemmer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Juan. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. Agenda item 6A is the review of the fiscal year 2024 financial report to the board. This item does not require any action. Mr. Infantini is present and can answer any questions, is available for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to present the current year's financial report to the board. What this is the first 9 months of our fiscal year 2024. So 2024, we were just talked about the 2026 to 27 biennium. We're currently still in 2020. It began in September. We'll end August 31st, and then we will begin the second year of the biennium, September 1st, 2024. The report in front of you shows kind of the structures that our current budget is operating under. You'll see a lot of the programs that have been discussed today and in prior meetings. One thing that we will be looking at with respect to that budget is the UB or unexpended balances that will exist at the end of this year. Almost all of our programs, certainly almost all of the programs where we are granting or providing funds to institutions have that UB authority through our budget riders, which will allow us to kind of move money across years within the biennium, which provides some flexibility with timing, but also if y'all remember from the last session, we did receive a number of appropriation items either through House Bill 8 or through Senate Bill 30, which was a supplemental bill. And that gave us the money in a big pot of money, a big one lump sum, and we are spending it over the biennium. So that UB authority really provides us that timing smoothness to help us manage things. So at this point, we're monitoring, making sure things that need to move through are moving and being ready to kind of adjust that budget as needed. And you'll see in the budget adjustments, we anticipate a number of those you'll see in the maybe not the next quarter, but when we start reporting in fiscal year 2025, you'll see a lot more budget adjustments reflecting that authority. And then towards the end of the report, you'll see the kind of report on student loans and bond activities. And I do want to brief the committee on our bond sale. We were able to take advantage of a little lull in the capital markets and a decrease in the bond yields in June. And we were able to ready to complete a sale of $110 million of bonds, which will fund student loans in the College Access Loan Program for the 2024 to 25 academic year. We were fortuitous in the timing, and also is a good kind of statement about the Texas capital markets that we were able to achieve an interest cost of about 4.2% on those bonds, which if you look now, that was actually below the 10-year Treasury yield at that point. And we were able to use those the interest rate to kind of inform the loans that we are going to, the loan rates for the upcoming academic year. So those rates are going to be in effect August 1st. And what that is that's going to be a 6.3% student loan rate, but with the option, if students do select automatic pay or ACH, that can go down to 6.05% on those loans. I point that out because the federal direct student loans for the next academic year just reset to 6.53%. So regardless, students that take college access loans won't have higher rates than the federal program, which is, there was some unique timing aspects from when the feds set their rates to ours, but also, like I said, I think it was just a positive comment on the markets as far as like the way our bonds are structured with the general obligation of the state. And I think the students will benefit from that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Congratulations on that move. That's great
Thank
for
you.
the students.
It really is.
Yeah, Anthony does a great job in your team. Thank you. I know that I quizzed you a little bit about that in a conversation, but that's really good.
No, we have a great team. We have great advisors, and we kind of work together very closely to be as flexible as we can, but also we're trying to build as much predictability into this as possible so we can communicate as clearly as possible to those that the stakeholders that may be impacted. So that's going to be a real goal of ours going forward, of kind of making sure kind of we are operating this in as clear and transparent way as possible for the borrower so they can be ready to react and respond accordingly.
Well, thank you for the report. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. You noted here that the level of the bond was lower than last year because of lower borrower volume. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I'm sorry. I almost always mention that every time. I apologize. Sorry, I'm a new member of. So there's a couple aspects to that. So one aspect is there's a new program called the Forward Loan Program we introduced last year, which was a very it's a boutique, I want to say, program at this point, but it's very specified to providing like last step loans to students who have like what was called high value, certificates of value. The way we are funding those is with the prepayments we've already received from prior bonds. So we are almost in essence taking the repayments we've received, the money that's not tied to any bonds that's in excess and on our reserve, and able to re-inject that into new loans. The volume is not material per se, but it is another option there. And those rates are set to be a little lower than the rates for the college access loan because we don't have to pay the debt on that, but we do tie it to the borrowing costs there. But the other more material item that happened was last year at this time, we introduced a rule that limited the amount of loans that were going to be offered, like the total dollar amount that a student can borrow to try to make sure the debt they graduate with is manageable. So what that did is, in essence, make sure students were not borrowing too much relative to what they might reasonably expect to be able to be paid over the course of the loan. And what that does will have a little depressing effect on the amount of the loan that could be borrowed. And it makes kind of combining those two kind of is what we were expecting as far as the decrease. And we think we may actually see some more volume kind of going down going forward just because of the timing impacts on when that loan went into effect. But those are the big drivers.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item 7A is discussion of the audit and agency-wide financial statements for the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2023. by KPMG LLP. This item is for information only. Ms. Susan Warren, audit partner, and Shannon Canals, senior manager from KPMG, will present this item and be available to answer any questions. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here. Susan Warren with KPMG.
Shannon Canals, Audit Senior Manager.
So we are here to talk about the results of the August 2023 audit. Just go backwards a little further. I keep hearing the new year budget. Now we're back to 23, but this is the end of the results of the 23 audit. On slide 4, if we could advance to slide 4, is really kind of the summary. So this tells you every possible thing that if it occurs in an audit, we have responsibility to communicate to the committee. X's mean there's nothing to say. So that's a good thing. There's one check mark, and that's just because we always have to talk about estimates. So the key there is the unmodified. So takeaway is your opinion was unmodified or clean. There was no problems with the audit, essentially is what this page tells you, or we'd have a bunch of check marks we'd have to talk about. So that's my kind of way to visualize that screen. But if you move to the next slide, these are some more things we'd have to tell you if there was any illegal acts, if we had any control issues, if we had an independence issue, all those things say no. So there's nothing there to report either. Next slide. This is the estimates we have to tell you about. I'm sure you're well aware you have your student loans in there. They have an allowance for uncollectability. So we do take a pretty good look at that, looking at the assumptions, historical write-offs, collections, things like that. And what that bottom line tells you is we didn't find anything that was inconsistent with the way management had presented their estimate. Next slide. These are the questions that we asked you when we came for planning. There's here as a reminder of the responsibilities of the committee to talk to us about if any of these things were to occur, but that's simply what it is since we've already issued our audit. And that should be the last slide in the deck. So does anybody have any questions?
So, Ms. Warren, thank you. I know you're very knowledgeable in the area with the coordinating board. So for our new members, can you let us give us a synopsis of what you do for the board?
Absolutely.
How long you've been doing that, and also the things that you look for.
Sure, can do that. So KPMG has been your external auditor, goodness gracious, since 2020, I believe, whenever you first had an audit. So we were the first firm hired, and we've been doing it ever since. What we do is a financial statement audit. So what we do is we take the numbers that Anthony and his team provide to you, not the budget, but the actual results of that. And we look at both the balance sheet, so that's going to be your loans, your cash, your debt, and the income statement, which is going to be the interest on those loans, and your expenses, primarily your grants that you push throughout to the universities and the colleges. And we look to make sure those have been reasonably presented. What that means is we test controls. So you have your big IT systems. We bring an IT team in. We actually test to make sure that you've got good access policies, that you've got good change management policies, batch, because a lot of your stuff is done in batch operations overnight. How does that work? And then we would, what we refer to as application controls. So think of those as interface controls. It moves from one system to another, or when the system does a math calculation, we make sure that those things are being done correctly, especially on the loan side, making sure your principal and interest is being applied to the appropriate account, that interest is being calculated correctly, things like that. So we rely a lot on the IT systems, and then we bring in that reduces your risk, or our audit risk, if you will, because the controls are working. So then we do substantive test work, which means that we would pick samples. So we'll look at your bank statements at year end. We confirm all your debt at year end. We actually look at your loan receivable reconciliation back to the system to make sure anything that doesn't tie is a reasonable reconciling item. We'll actually pick expenditures, primarily your grants that you disperse, to make sure they were appropriately approved in the LAR, that they were actually paid, the cash left the bank, went to the right person. So we do look at all those various types of transactions. The financial statements themselves are pretty voluminous just because it rolls up into the statewide. And so we do also review all the footnotes, which include all your OPEB, which is your post-retirement benefits, your pension benefits, your leases, all that type of stuff. So we look at all those disclosures and work with the management team to make sure those are appropriately disclosed, if you will, outside of basically the balance sheet, the income statement. Management does all of that. We do the audit. We put our opinion on it, saying that it's fairly presented.
You need more work from us, or is that like you've got?
Your audit's a fairly large size audit just because of the way that you rely on your IT systems. Yes. Any questions about that process?
Any other questions?
I have a quick question.
Sir,
So when you look at IT systems, are you also looking at it from a cybersecurity component?
we inquire about cybersecurity just to make sure there hasn't been an attack that would basically cause some potential integrity issues to the data, but we do not audit cybersecurity. That is outside the professional standards for an audit.
I do believe that we have other testing done
do.
on cybersecurity, so that is just not covered by this.
Right. Because we get those results to make sure there's nothing there.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure.
We will move on to the next item. Agenda item 7B is consideration and possible action to approve the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2025. Arby Gonzalez, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and be available for questions. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Wilson, members. My name is Arby Gonzalez, and I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, and I'm presenting the proposed internal audit plan for fiscal year 2025 for your consideration and approval. This plan is specific to the internal audit team, and what that does is we take a look at our agency's internal processes to make sure that we're doing the things that we're supposed to as best as we can. Later on, Mr. Mayor will present the compliance monitoring plan, which is our plan for the compliance monitoring team to review external institutions to ensure that those institutions are complying with our agency's requirements. So again, this is our internal audit plan, which is specific to our internal processes. The plan summarizes our approach to learn about agency functions and processes by discussing program risks and processes with agency leadership, management, and key staff, reviewing policies, procedures, statute, rules, or other requirements, taking a look at our previous internal and external audit coverage, and then our own internal audit team's knowledge, expertise, and professional judgment. We use that information to assess risks based on their impacts to our agency's strategic goals, operational processes, finances, and reputational standing. And then we also weigh that against our assessments of monitoring and controls within our agency's programs and their processes. The plan includes 5 proposed projects related to information technology and data security, community college finance, specifically related to our process to receive, analyze, and prepare public college data, the steps before calculating the formula funding amounts for each community college. We had done an internal audit related to community college finance, and specifically for the controls related to calculating the amounts for each institution this year. Number 3, academic program approvals, 4, grant administration, and 5, contract and procurement, which is statutorily required. We are statutorily required to include a project related to contract and procurement in each year's internal audit plan. These are broad subjects at this point, and we'll hone these project areas into more focused audit objectives when we engage those projects in fiscal 25. We feel these projects align best with what's most important to the agency. We want to do work that matters, work that's important to the agency. This plan is also flexible, and we're ready to take on other projects to address emerging risks or events should they occur. The plan also includes other activities that our internal audit functions does throughout the year. We're required to obtain continuing professional education. We follow up on previous recommendations that our audit team has done. And then we're also deeply focused and engaged on internal audit process improvements, including management system updates, and then reviewing and updating our procedures to align with new audit standards that were released earlier this calendar year. We are requesting your recommendation to approve the internal audit plan, and this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Anybody have any questions? If not, can I have a motion to approve the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2025?
So moved.
Motion by Emma. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Juan.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed,
Aye.
say no. Aye, motion passes. Thank you, and please thank your team for all this work.
Thank you so much. Will do.
He makes it look easy, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. Agenda item 7C 1 through 3 are the auditor's update on the internal audit reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Irby Gonzalez, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and be available for any questions. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. Again, my name is Arby Gonzalez. I'll provide an update on the activities we did since the last board meeting. Primarily, we completed an audit of community college finance that I spoke about earlier in the previous agenda item. We focused this audit on the payment calculation process conducted by funding and resource planning. There were no issues on this report. The program area correctly calculated institutions' funding amounts for fiscal year 2024, which means it adhered to applicable statutes, rules, and procedures, ensured it used correct data from data management and research group, and accurately and consistently applied formulas to its tool to calculate funding. Please note that we focused this project specifically on funding and resource planning's process and key tools to calculate those amounts, and not the entirety of the community college finance process. We wanted to maintain a continuous presence on this high-profile agency important strategic program. So we wanted to make sure that we have a consistent presence within it. That's why it's also on the plan for 2025. Our audit plan, we want to thank Emily Cromier and Chris Fernandez and their team for their help during this audit, and also for their attention and diligence to this program, for setting it up so quickly, and also for their continued efforts to ensure that it evolves the way that it needs to. We've also wrapped a project on the Texas Research Initiative Program. We're finalizing that report. It's not quite ready for prime time, but it will be soon. We also assisted during KPMG's financial statement audit. We did a little bit of work to help them out in completing their financial statement audit. We assessed risk and proposed the internal audit plan, which thank you so much for the consideration and approval. And we continue to review and revise. We need to continue to looking at our own process, ensure that we're keeping up with with the agency and its initiatives and the things especially as we need to implement processes to ensure we comply with new audit standards. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Members, do you have any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item 8A is consideration possible action to adopt the compliance monitoring plan for fiscal year 2025. Irby Gonzalez, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, Paul Mayert, Director of Compliance, will present this item and are available for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Paul Mayert, and I serve as the Director of Compliance for our Internal Audit and Compliance team. I'm presenting the proposed compliance monitoring plan for fiscal year 2025 for your consideration and approval. The compliance monitoring plan for the next upcoming year offers a strategy for compliance projects that we will conduct to enhance and protect our agency's mission. And we designed a flexible plan to respond to board, commissioner, or executive management requests to address critical risks as they might occur. We believe this plan provides coverage of key compliance monitoring risks, giving our capabilities and resources. We present 25 projects listed in the attached documents that we plan to do in the upcoming fiscal year. We developed the projects in this plan by systematically assessing risk, including reviewing statutorily defined risks, discussing risks with management, discussing risks with other stakeholders, including institutions, and using our own professional judgment. The plan includes projects roughly split into 3 equal major areas of formula funding, financial assistance, and sexual misconduct reporting. The attached documents include details on the specific institutions and the types of projects that we expect to conduct. The plan also includes other activities that our compliance monitoring function does similar to the internal audit function, continuing professional education, follow-up recommendations, process improvements, system updates, and updating our procedures. We're requesting your recommendation to approve the compliance monitoring plan for the upcoming fiscal year at the upcoming board meeting, as well as currently. This concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for either gentleman? If not, can I have a motion to adopt the compliance monitoring plan for fiscal year 2025? Do I have a motion? Motion by Juan. Second by Emma. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Aye. Motion passes. We will move on to agenda item 8B, 1 through 8, the auditor's update on the state and federal compliance monitoring reports and activities. These items do not require action. R.B. Gonzalez, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, and Paul Mayert, Director of Compliance, will present this item and be available for questions. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I'll give the update on their compliance monitoring activities. This is activity since our last board meeting in April. For state compliance monitoring, we conducted 7 state compliance monitoring projects, plus our quarterly corrective action status report since our prior meeting. And each of the individual reports are included in your materials. There's one of these reports that I would like to highlight, and that's the review of tuition equalization grant at Jacksonville College. This report includes 2 observations, one related to information security controls and one related to audit logs. With respect to information security controls, the institution did not provide sufficient documentation regarding information technology control policies and procedures, indicating that internal control and risk management standards have been fully implemented. Because of this issue, we chose to delay further review of the underlying financial aid data until after full implementation of the revised associated policies and procedures. In addition, the student information system does not provide audit logs or change history for critical financial aid data, which may limit the ability to verify the integrity of system information. Management is addressing the noted issues. Once again, information technology, we've mentioned it a couple of times, the importance thereof. This is another indicator of the need on our particular community colleges, the need to make sure and pay attention to those things. We currently expect to complete all of our projects from our current year plan in time to report those results in our next meeting in October. We've had some delays due to unexpected staff outages, as well as training new staff, but I'm very pleased with our progress in spite of these hurdles. With that, we move to federal compliance monitoring. Nothing unusual to report there. Direct you to the details in the notes in the blue page. And as we continue with our subrecipient monitoring, as well as our federal subrecipient review work. You can see both from today's meeting, our discussions about GEAR funding has dropped off considerably, and we're catching up on those pieces on our federal stuff, and we'll see that wind down shortly, next 6 months or a year or so. And that concludes my update. I'd be happy to address any questions that you may have.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. Any questions? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item. Agenda item 9A and 9B were approved on consent. Next item, agenda item 10 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? The time is 1:28. Do we have a second? Second, all in favor? Aye.
Hey.
We are hereby adjourned.